In order to fully understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, we must first look at something that happened a few months preceding it. The Bay of Pigs. America's failed invasion of Cuba. Upon arrival to the beach, the American soldiers were caught off guard by a jeep.
Look out, Jeep incoming.
Don't shoot, you'll give us away.
Aw, we can take him.
Because one of the American soldiers disobeyed orders and shot at the jeep, the Americans' cover was blocked.
Look out, it's the Soviets.
Meanwhile, on the battleship that the soldiers had arrived on,
What was that?
I don't know, I heard fighting.
Quickly, man the turrets.
the ship had sustained too much damage. The captain was forced to beach it.
Damage is too much. We have to beach the ship.
The mission was a complete failure. Everyone died. Over the next few months, America was still suspicious of Cuba. They sent U-2 spy planes to try and find out what they were hiding. The photos produced by the spy plane were shocking to the Americans. The photos were immediately brought to the attention of JFK.
Sir, the U-2 brought its photos back.
What do they show?
It's better that you see for yourself. Mr. President, do these photos mean anything to you?
Sadly, yes. The Soviets are building a nuclear base in Cuba.
John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States of America. Castro, the President of Cuba. Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union. All three of these leaders knew the threats of a nuclear war, and all three of them knew that once one started, there'd be no stopping it.
So, Mr. President, what's our move gonna be?
I'll give a speech tomorrow morning, telling all of America what happened.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
Part of the reason behind Kennedy's speech was to send a message directly to Castro. Satellites were not fully developed yet, so things like speeches were the closest and quickest way to get it to him. The only other real way to send messages was through mail, but that would normally take a while to get to its destination. That is, if it even gets to its destination. At this point, the tensions have truly started to rise. The U.S. has implemented a naval blockade to stop resources from entering Cuba. In order to further threaten the blockade, the Soviet Union put nuclear missile-bearing submarines in the Atlantic Ocean. The naval blockade wasn't the only thing that was being used by the U.S. to threaten the Russians. We were also flying massive ships carrying bombs above Russia. And the Russians weren't the only people we were threatening either. At this point, Castro was enraged because the U.S. continued to fly their spy planes just above tree level in Cuba. At this point, Khrushchev sent his first letter. This letter was deeply from the heart and sent directly to Kennedy. The next day, a second letter arrived from Khrushchev, but this one was less kind and demanded that the U.S. take their missiles out of Turkey. Kennedy believed that this was sent, not from Khrushchev, but from the government of Russia. JFK ordered for flights over Canada to try and test the air for Soviet Union nuclear bomb testing. Unfortunately, there was a navigational error, and somehow the pilot ended up over the Soviet Union instead of Canada. Immediately, Soviet Air Force was on him. So did he make it? Yes, he did. Unfortunately, on the same day, there was somebody with much less fortunate circumstances. The U.S. was still sending U-2 flights over Cuba. Rudolph Anderson's flight had not returned yet.
Permission to fire, sir?
Permission granted.
Shot down over Cuba, Rudolph Anderson never made it home.
Mr. President, it's time to make our move.
Not yet.
But that was the sign. That was the act of war.
I said not yet.
Castro was angry that Khrushchev was not keeping him in the loop, but he also became unhinged and declared that he would sacrifice himself and Cuba for Russia's cause.
Khrushchev, you haven't been keeping me in the loop. Fine, I'll try and alert you whenever we make any. That's not the point. I just want you to know that Cuba has your back, and we're willing to sacrifice ourselves for the cause. Oh, well, in that case, we have a deal.
It was on this night when families in the U.S., Cuba, and the Soviet Union all feared for their lives.
Hey, kid, I'm home.
Oh, thanks, darling. I can take it from here.
No, it's fine. I can help.
Sir, we're cleared for launch.
This never happened. Khrushchev never launched his nukes that he had stored in Cuba. Instead, he came to an agreement with Kennedy. Kennedy took his nukes out of Italy and Turkey, while Khrushchev took his nukes out of Cuba. To what extent did the Cuban Missile Crisis turn the tide of the Cold War? Well, for starters, it eased up the tensions between JFK and Khrushchev. What could have gotten worse and turned into a nuclear war never did. Although this was not related to Kennedy's actions whatsoever, the Cuban Missile Crisis could have been one of the many causes of the fall of the Soviet Union and the forming of modern-day Russia. And what about long-term effects? Well, for starters, the nuclear bases were shut down. All of the nukes that we've been churning out during the Cold War were either destroyed or moved and not end up being used. And the good news is, it worked. Since the crisis, no country has used or even threatened to use nuclear bombs on another country.
Aftermath.
Fidel Castro was one of the longest ruling leaders in Cuban history. He truly put Cuba on the map. After being accused of reckless behavior during the crisis, Khrushchev was demoted and no longer had his rank as the leader of the Soviets. After the crisis, Kennedy was considered a hero. Unfortunately, during a parade, he was shot by a lone gunner. Although the Cuban Missile Crisis was very close to becoming a full-scale nuclear war, due to the naval blockade implemented by John F. Kennedy and the constant communication between U.S. and Soviet leaders, the crisis was avoided. For now, we are all safe.